So King Antiochus Epiphanes launched a massive campaign of repression against the Jewish religion in 168. So there was a revolt, a rebellion against this. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the king of Syria, captured Jerusalem in 167 BC and desecrated the temple by offering the sacrifice of a pig on an altar to Zeus, in brackets, the abomination of desolation. In seeking to prohibit Judaism and Hellenize the Jews, mix them with Greek paganism and all that kind of thing, Antiochus forbade their religious practices and commanded that copies of the law be burned, all of which is related by Josephus in Antiquities of the Jews. The reason he chose that name is because Epiphanes means God manifest, which is just like another example or typology of that the Antichrist will claim to be God. So it's one of those types, one of those typologies in my view. So Epiphanes meaning God manifest or the glorious illustrious. And this is him, Antiochus Epiphanes. So he was a Greek Hellenistic king, 175 BC to 164 BC. So it was a couple of hundred years, just 164 years before Christ. He assumed the name Antiochus after he ascended the throne. His accession to the throne was controversial and he was seen as a usurper by some. And what he did was he sacrificed a pig on the altar in Jerusalem. The Greek king Antiochus IV Epiphanes, after the Greeks conquered Jerusalem, Antiochus had a statue of Zeus built in the second temple, possibly in the Kodesh HaKodashim, i.e. the Holy of Holies, the holy sanctuary chamber in the back, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar, and there's a picture of it there. I guess, you know, an unclean animal. There's the picture of the pig on the altar in the temple. So he desecrated it, just like it says in the book of Daniel, obviously placing a monument of a foreign god inside their temple and using its altar of incense to sacrifice an unclean animal was considered a terrible affront. But Antiochus did not stop there. He actively sought to impose Greek polytheism on the Jews and persecuted anyone who refused to assimilate into Greek culture, that forbidden mix of pagan culture. And then this is how they responded. A revolt. Yehuda ha-Maccabi was a priest from the village of Modin and the third son of Mattiyahu Hashmonai. In English we call him Judah Maccabee. He led the revolt against the Greeks, pushing them out of Jerusalem and eventually out of Israel altogether. Then he rededicated the temple by lighting the menorah inside. We commemorate these events every year on the 25th of Kislev. We call it Hanukkah. So that's the festival Hanukkah, and that's what the festival Hanukkah is representing, which is obviously still celebrated today. And then just as a reference here, Daniel 11:31, his armed forces shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. The abomination of desolation, or the abomination that causes desolation. And right there, as we said, is one of the fulfillments of that. Some people think it's the final one. I personally think it's a typology, and it's one of those fulfillments. But yeah, that's my opinion. But that's Daniel 11:31 describes it exactly. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. You see here, Hanukkah is called the Feast of Dedication because it celebrates the Maccabees' victory over Greek oppression and the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. See, this is in John 10:22. Jesus is there in the temple, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus was walking in the temple courts in Solomon's colonnade. So Jesus was there in the temple at the festival of Hanukkah. Even though that's not documented in the Bible, but in the book of Maccabees. But yeah, as a historical event, as we said, Maccabees is not inspired, but it talks about that historical event. And Jesus was there at the festival of dedication, or Hanukkah, in Jerusalem, in the temple. So that's it's pretty interesting. And Hanukkah this year is very soon, and it's about this event that took place with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabean revolt. So he was a great villain. That's a coin depicting him. And then on the right-hand side of this coin, it has the so-called goddess of victory, which is Nike. It says here, this is Bible History Daily. It says, many names come to mind when someone mentions the great villains of the Bible. Some are foreign powers like the Pharaoh of the Exodus or King Nebuchadnezzar, and some are native Israelites such as King Saul and King Ahab. The great villains in the era of the New Testament and the early church often took the form of great persecutors. King Herod the Great, Nero, Domitian. There is one that escapes the attention of biblical pop culture, and that is Antiochus Epiphanes. And it talks about here how Antiochus Epiphanes effectively stepped into the role of the little horn of Daniel's visions and became the apocalyptic supervillain archetype that remains within the psyche of the Christian belief system to this day. So yeah, this Antichrist figure